And during this time, we finished up, and this is the part that everyone should sit up on their seat right now and listen to this. What I'm going to tell you is that we recently documented for this book and video series that there's widespread fraud in the field of human evolution.
Hey guys, I'm Ryan Hembree, and I'm so happy and honored to be joined today by Dr. Carl Werner. He's a medical doctor, biologist, researcher, and author, among many other things. He's in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and it's been a lot of years since we've chatted. So, Dr. Werner, welcome. How you been doing?
Good. It's good to be with you today. I haven't been to a Tim Hortons since the last time we were there. And I haven't seen Hockey Mania at the Burger Kings since the last time we were there. So it's good to interact with my Canadian friends.
Well, I hear you there. And you were on a vacation recently, and you ran into some Canadians down there, didn't you?
Yeah, my wife and I just went to the Masters. My wife drugged me to the Masters golf tournament. And we keep running into all these Canadians, Adam Hadwin, I think is his name, and Nick Taylor. And I told Debbie the Canadians are taking over the world because they're everywhere. When you see them in golf, the Canadians are taking over. So yeah, we had a great time down there, and we're just there for one day for one of the practice days, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's great, and I hope we can get you in the studio here sometime so we can get you some Tim Hortons coffee, because that's very important. Now, a lot of people know who you are, but for those who don't, I was wondering if you could just share with us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I always tell people that I am the person in the church who came in through the back door. You know, when I grew up, first of all, my parents were amazingly great parents. They were very moral, very good parents. But our church did not emphasize the inerrancy of the Bible, something I regret. They did not emphasize the creation story. And so you might say I was unanchored, even though everything was good at the house and super parents, but intellectually, I was unanchored. And as I drifted unanchored in the sea of life, I started asking myself, do I believe in God? And, why am I following all these rules of religion when I'm not even sure there is a God? And when my professors then told me that evolution was true, when I entered college and medical school at age 18, I had no reason not to believe it or not. And so I wish things were different, but it is what it is. And I believed in evolution until one day a friend took me out. I was 19 years old. I was in medical school. I was Mr. Science. I was Mr. Science nerd. I was there on a 4-year science scholarship in medical school, age 19. And it was a casual night out with my friend, and he asked me, what do I think about naturalism, the Big Bang, evolution? And I told him I believe, and he posed 3 questions to me, Ryan, that changed my life, literally changed my life. His first question was, Carl, you believe in naturalism, that the universe formed naturally. But how would the universe form naturally since matter, that's atoms, hydrogen, helium, carbon, sulfur, all the little atoms that make up life, don't form from nothingness? And I knew that was true. I knew that matter doesn't form from nothingness. And yet I believed in a natural origin of the universe. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And what my thought is doesn't really line up with the laws of physics. And so I had to just sit back just for a second. And then he threw a second question. He said, Carl, you believe that the life formed from chemicals, millions of years ago. And there was this primordial soup where there was, lightning and heated sides of a volcano and it formed the first living thing. That would be the first bacteria. He said, but you know that the large molecules, that would be DNA, RNA, proteins, which are all necessary for life to begin. They're in every living thing today. He said, you know, they never form naturally under any conditions. And I knew that to be true because we had just finished biochemistry. In other words, since DNA never, ever, ever could form naturally, same with RNA, same with proteins, same with enzymes, how could life ever begin naturally? And it was silent. You know, even though I was at Minsky's Pizza Parlor on a Sunday night, it was just, I couldn't hear anything. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, have I been duped here into believing all this stuff? And then his third question was, Carl, you know that the fossil record doesn't show evolution. I said, no, I'd never heard that. He said, well, there's all these fossils, and now the number of fossils collected is like 1 billion. That's a B, billion fossils, 1,000 museums with a million fossils each. The museums have collected 1 billion fossils, but evolution doesn't show up in the fossil record. In other words, just the animal groups just suddenly appear in the fossil record, and we don't see, you know, like a mouse evolving into a bat, or, you know, a lizard evolving into a pteris or a flying lizard. How could you reconcile that with such a large fossil record? It seems impossible that you would always be missing the intermediate animals, which should be there just as much as the end and beginning animals. And, you know, Ryan, I sat back there. This whole conversation took me about 1.5 minutes. And by the way, I would recommend everybody using those same 3 questions for an evangelization tool. But in 1.5 minutes, I just realized that I had been duped. I didn't know what to do about it because I still couldn't explain all the things I had already been told about dinosaurs, about millions of years and all this. But I had enough information to say, okay, something's wrong here, and I'm going to go figure this out. I couldn't figure it out. It took me so long to try. I read books for those next 18 years. That would be from age 19 to, I guess, age 37 or something. And I still didn't have satisfactory answers. So finally, I talked my wife into a 1-year project where we would go out, form a television production company. We go out to the dinosaur dig sites, and we would interview and just try to get some answer. How would you put this all together, that creation happened, but then you got the dinosaurs and all these just really honest questions, you know? And our 1-year project turned out to be 27 years, which we just finished.
Wow.
And yeah, and each answer came at great price to me personally. You know, we did this on our own dime, our own time, and there was no church, there was no university behind us. This was just my wife and I just saying, we're going to do this. And the answers came slow. They came, you know, sometimes it would take 10 years to get a paragraph for the book, you know, 10 years of interviewing.
Wow. Then
you got that paragraph set, you know. But those are the answers that were the critical answers that I needed to say, oh, I got this all, you know, assembled in my mind. What happened, you know, that there was this creation with what turns out to be a flood event that explains all the fossils quite nicely. But, and during this time, we finished up, and this is the part that everyone should sit up on their seat right now and listen to this. What I'm going to tell you is that we recently documented for this book and video series that there's widespread fraud in the field of human evolution. And we documented it because Debbie and I were flying around the world. We're going to Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, Paris, you know, Spain, Germany, Belgium, South America. We went to wherever we knew there were fossils. We went there to interview the scientists about their ape-man fossils. And it soon became apparent that there was widespread fraud in the field of human evolution. Now, when I say widespread, I'm saying We documented 150 frauds carried out by the evolution scientists working in this field of human evolution.
Seriously?
150. It's an enormous,
wow.
It's an enormous number. It's an enormous amount. And it actually just removes the linchpin for evolution, because evolution, I had all these problems, which I just mentioned, but it all had been hanging on, well, we have these human evolution fossils, and it shows an ape slowly changing into a human through the intermediate called an ape-man. But it turns out that there's frauds in most of these, and the other ones are just, there's mistakes. And how do I know this? Because we photographed the original fossils. I'm saying what were reported to be ape-man fossils. We interviewed the scientists who had found them. We went to the museums in all these countries and got into the vaults where they store the original fossils.
Wow.
And then we interviewed the scientists who were involved in these. And there's so many frauds, it's ridiculous. In fact, this is the biggest news for Christianity, for actually Muslims, for Jews, for anybody who believes in creation. This is the biggest news, other than soft tissue on the dinosaur bones, soft tissue, that everybody should stand up right now and do a lap around your bedroom or wherever you're watching this, tap your head and woo or something, just because this is such an enormous, joyous occasion. And if you can grab this, you will see that the theory of naturalism has just collapsed. And this was a missing piece. And it just so happened to be, we were able to get all this. So I'm going to be most anxious to share, some of these. I don't think we could do all 150 tonight, but I would like to share some of them. And I wanted you to see how real they are, that it's not like, no, Carl Werner just saying they did fraud. No, when I say fraud, that's a very dangerous word to use, because it's litigious. Someone could sue you if you're saying you're accusing them of fraud when they really didn't do fraud. No, I'm saying fraud is a scientist knowingly misleads his audience, the public, his colleagues. Not he was overzealous. Oh, he's really stupid. He really made a stupid mistake there, calling a pig tooth an ape-man tooth. No, that's not fraud. That's just stupid. That's just overzealous. But fraud is when you know that you're telling your audience is false. That is a big deal. And if you got 150 frauds, just imagine how many mistakes I have. We have 232 mistaken ape-men species that we documented. And so I am very anxious to get to this and to tell you all about it.
Wow, and I can't wait to get to that as well. But I was wondering, you mentioned, this has been a long journey for you and your wife, and you've called this Evolution: The Grand Experiment. And when I talked to you last, you had 2 volumes of this. I was wondering, before you get to these frauds, could you go through with us what you documented in those first 2 volumes?
Okay, and I'll do it briefly, but I'll just give you the gist so you can sense what's going on. I'm going to screen share here. The first book is Evolution: The Grand Experiment, and this basically takes the audience through what the fossil record shows. See, in the museums, they show dinosaurs evolving from some animal, but they never put these numbers on the chart. But when we interviewed, we realized that they had collected 100,000 dinosaurs, and there were 0 ancestors for any dinosaur species. Same way with bats, 1,000 bats, no ancestors. 1,000 pterosaurs or pterodactyls, no ancestors. Seals, no ancestors. There was a few animals that did have ancestors, like whales and birds, but those turned out to be fraudulent also. We covered those frauds in this book. So this book just covers the fossil record, showing that the fossil record does not support evolution. The second book was called Living Fossils, and it was my experiment to test creation. And my idea is that if creation was true, and that all the animals were made at the same time, like dinosaurs and humans and dogs and cats and apple trees, all the plants and animals that we see today, plus the extinct ones, were all living at the same time. And then there was a flood. My prediction would be that the flood would be like a globe ball, the snow globe ball your grandma has on her desk, where you shake it up in snow. Well, that if you had all the animals that ever lived on the earth in a flood, that you should, when they all settle down in the flood, you should find some modern animals next to dinosaurs. And this was my book called Living Fossils. I said, if creation is true, then you should see modern animals with dinosaurs. And that's in fact what we found. We found, like, for example, here's a redwood tree. Here's a redwood limb. And here's a fossil redwood that was found right next to the dinosaur. This one is found next to the dinosaur. So redwoods were modern plants, and they lived at the same time as the dinosaurs, and that fit my prediction just perfectly. And same with, like, let's say the nautilus. Like, here's a modern nautilus shellfish, and here's a fossil that was found next to a dinosaur. They look unchanged. But here is why no one notices, and I didn't notice this, and the scientists didn't tell me about this, is when they find a fossil that looks just like the modern animal, they rename it. Like the nautilus is called Nautilus pampilius, that's a genus and species. But for this fossil found next to a dinosaur, they don't call it Nautilus pampilius, they call it Sinoceras texanum. So that's how they got away with it for years. Nobody actually compared the fossils, compared to the modern animals with the species names and genus names written out next to them. Now, if you took these two nautiluses, the modern and the fossil, and cut them in half, this is what it would look like. Here's the modern nautilus cut in half. Can you see that, Ryan?
Yes, I can.
And here is a nautilus that was cut in half that was found next to a dinosaur. And you can see they look exactly the same.
Yeah, they're the same.
I mean, you would say these look more similar than two types of dogs, which are the same species.
Absolutely.
But look what they did. The modern nautilus is Nautilus pampilius, and the fossil found next to a dinosaur, they rename it so you don't think it's the same, and they call it Sinoceras lineatus. And that is an entire book we did, and it was modern ducks with dinosaurs, modern loons with dinosaurs, modern boa constrictors, box turtles, iguanas, hedgehogs, and it goes on and on and on, possums. Now, we didn't find every animal, but that's not what my prediction said. My prediction would be there had to be some modern animals next to the dinosaurs if it was creation. And we found animals from every major phylum living today next to the dinosaurs and looked unchanged. And every major plant division looked the same as the dinosaur era fossils. So that was the second book we did. And that was a lot of work. And the third book, which just came out this year, and this isn't the fraud thing yet. This third book is called Untold Stories of Human Evolution. And I just basically said, I'm going to do a book on the ape-men that were made out of non-primates, like animals that aren't apes or monkeys, but they were mistaken ape-men that were made out of other animals. So, like, this book covers these ape-men here on the left, like the Libyan hominid, the Orsi man, Australopithecus, Prometheus. And these ape-men here were created from these animals here on the right. In other words, this dolphin, its rib was interpreted to be the collarbone of an ape-man. And this pig, the tooth, was interpreted to be the tooth of the Nebraska man. And the donkey skull turned out to be the Orsi man. So that is just pretty, excuse me for my terminology, it's just kind of stupid on the scientist's part that they couldn't even name the correct animal group. They're taking animals from the barnyard and saying these are ape-man fossils. And so I just did that just to show how much scientists who are well trained. Now, these scientists had 43 university professorships, and they made these mistakes. And they wrote 128 books on evolution, and yet they're making these mistakes. And they founded like 14 natural history museums, yet they made these mistakes. So these credentials are meaningless if you can have these credentials, professorships, museum curator, museum founder, and yet you can't even tell the difference between a cat bone, cat hip bone, and Australopithecus prometheus, hip bone. So that was the third book in our project, and that just got released. It's called Untold Stories of Human Evolution. And then the fourth book was this one. It's 9 categories of ape-men. And basically, there are 232 ape-men that have been overturned. 232 species of ape-men that have been overturned, like just Homo pampeus, Homo caputinclinatus, Homo, cinnamento. I could just go on. There's 232 of these.
Wow.
My question was, whatever happened to these? What did they turn out to be? If they were thought to be ape-men, these 232 species, what did they actually turn out to be? And so, like, there's so many, I had to come up with a system, and I decided I'd categorize them into 9 different groups. And so the 230 ape-men that were mistaken turned out to be the 9 groups. And one group was, some of them were monkey bones, and that's Dr. Dart's mistakes. Some of them turned out to be ordinary ape bones. A lot of the scientists did that. Some turned out to be recently buried humans, like a human that was buried 100 or 200 years ago, like Uncle Bill or great grandma. Someone dug up those bones just from a recent grave and said, oh, it's an ape-man. That would be like Homo capensis and Homo cinnamento.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then another category was ape-men that were created by scientists altering fossils. That would be like Piltdown and the like. And another category was ape-men made out of reptile bone, ape-men made out of these other kind of bones, ape-men made out of humans that were living during the Ice Age. And they're found with reindeer bones, like I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but so a lot of these were just humans. In fact, the majority of them were just humans or apes that were miscategorized as ape-men. But when I got to the end of this 27-year trail, Ryan, and I was writing the back cover of this last book called 9 Categories of Overturned Ape-Men, it occurred to me that we had interviewed scientists and they were pointing out frauds. And so I thought that would be nice to mention on the back cover of the book. This was just a couple of years ago. And so I started to write out, during the filming of this miniseries and production of this books, we came upon instances where scientists were accused of fraud or instances of fraud were uncovered. And I thought to myself, Ryan, I said, that's kind of a weak statement to make on the back of a book cover. I said, I need to count them up, because I wasn't focused on frauds this whole time. I should have been, but I was pretty dull. I let you say, I really didn't think to add them up, count them up, that was the bigger story than everything I wrote, everything I did up to this point in the 27 years I was working. Never occurred to me that was the biggest issue. And so I started counting them. Well, Dr. Raymond Dart, he did 35. He did a confession on those. And then there's a Piltdown. There's 3 or 4 there. And then there's this one. So I started counting them. Oh my gosh. We have documented 150 frauds. And I was astounded. Did I miss that? And I guess it was just the act of adding them up and just like listing them, like you'd have to do for a movie or a DVD. And it's like, oh my gosh, I missed this whole thing. So the books are done. All 4 books are done. I'm not going to change the books. There's no way, because that just took me, so long. By the way, the bibliography for this book, for the human evolution books, I don't know if you can see this. This is a bibliography. It's 432 pages long.
Wow.
This thing is really, really, really well documented. And I said, I'm not going to change that bibliography. I'm not going to write another book. I'm So I decided that then I would put these 150 frauds in our human evolution mini series that was just released. And you can get to that through our website, thegrandexperiment.com. And there were so many, we had to break the frauds into 4 categories, like ape-men frauds that were committed by scientists in the United States and North America. And the second video, which is the second category, is ape-men fraud that were committed by scientists working in Africa. That'd be like Richard Leakey, Louis Leakey, Raymond Dart. And the third one was ape-men that were fraudulently created by scientists working in Europe. That'd be Marcel and Boule and Jose Guibert and the gang. And then the last one was the latest ape-man fraud, which was Tumai. And so it's like, oh, wow. It's a good thing I could do videos because that's just an add-on. So we have the last 4 videos in our series, the Grand Experiment series, episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8, go through and document very graphically in a beautiful way and very easy to follow these 150 frauds. I'll do a few tonight, but I just want the audience to say, this isn't it. And if you really want to watch these frauds unfold, and everybody should, because this is historic, you should just get the videos as a family and go through, 1 video a night or a week. I think one a week would probably be enough for a family, and just watch them and just like, okay, here's fraud number 38, 39, and 40. Wow. And it's not that dry. It's very beautifully produced because we have the interviews of the scientists. But that's what I want to show you tonight. I want to show you the frauds, some of these frauds, so you can understand, no, it's just not a little thing. He's altered the fossil. He's altered the photograph. It's just, you could almost say criminal, but I won't say criminal because I don't think there's a law against it, but it's really bad. So I would like to, if you don't mind, maybe start going through a few of these frauds and just explain them to you. So you could just see a few and then you would appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm sure everybody watching can't wait to see these. So please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to my screen share. And if I don't have the screen share on, you let me know if I'm not showing you what I'm supposed to be showing you.
All right. We can see it.
Okay. One of the ape-men that I grew up with, and you probably have heard all your life, called Homo habilis, was found by Dr. Philip Tobias. He was in the country of South Africa, and he wrote up the original article that Homo habilis was a new type of ape-man with a larger brain than an ape. That was the whole thing, larger brain, and that's what you should pay attention to. Now, it didn't have a larger brain. It turned out to be just the size of an ape. But I'm going to show you how he made this with 4 frauds. I'll show you 3 of the frauds, how he made it have a larger brain and how we stumbled upon this. No one knew this. This was the photograph he published of Homo habilis. It's the left skull piece, and the fossil number is called 087. And he printed it in his monograph, a 400-page monograph in the 1990s. And it's in black and white. I looked at that picture. I never noticed anything wrong. Nothing jumps out at you. By the way, the letter B and A wasn't on there. It was just a black and white photo. I put the B and A on there. Debbie and I happened to go down and we photographed the fossils in Tanzania National Museum with the former national director of the Museum of Tanzania. And I told him I would like to photograph all the fossils from Olduvai Gorge. And so he pulled this one out, 087. And when I photographed it, I had no idea why was anything wrong. Everything seemed okay at the time. But then when I got home, I pulled out the photograph that he had published, Dr. Tobias had published, and I'm like, something is odd here. Can you see the differences between this is our photograph of the fossil, and this is his photograph of the fossil? Now, I didn't get this angle perfectly because I didn't think I was comparing it to anything. If I had known I was going to compare it to this, I would have shot the lens a little bit lower. So it would, but you get the idea that this is our picture, this is his picture, and there's something drastically different. And I started, what's different? And I was like, oh, letter B on his fossil is absent. There is no letter B. I was like, B, it's gone. Where's B? And then I started looking at it. I realized, oh, This is plaster. You
Really?
cannot add plaster to a fossil. And this was called the type specimen, which is the first and it's the most important. And it's the fossil that all other comparisons are going to be made to. So you can't alter the type specimen. And yet he altered the type specimen by adding this. And then as I started to look at it and getting a little bit more critical, I was like, wait a minute, something looks funny on these pictures. Now, if you'll notice A here and A here, this looks okay, but here it looks slightly different. Now you flip it over. Now here's the underside. This is the outer surface of the left skull piece, and here's the inner side of it. You flip it over, and all of a sudden you realize piece A is dramatically different than the rest of the fossil. It has a different texture, a different color. Now that could be possible, but now I'm suspicious because he's already altered this B. And then I notice he's connected this piece to this piece with a straight line. And see, if it was a puzzle-like fit, Ryan, you'd say, oh, well, it's the right piece. It just maybe got discolored because it was out in the sun or something like that.
Right.
But a straight line, it's easy to hook one straight line piece to another straight line piece mistakenly and think it's the same fossil. And if you go over to the other side, the right skull piece, he did the same thing over here. Here's his picture, here's our picture, and you flip them over and look at C here. It looks like he added bones to his skull to make it bigger. And then in the small print, now I'm really on a mission to find out what's going on here. In the small print of his monograph, he says that this skull, OH7, the type specimen of Homo habilis, was pieced together from a number of fragments found separately. So in other words, he could have found this all in one place, and this could have been, or this could have been 100 yards away from a different animal. That is very tacky. That is very unscientific to include that. And especially that these are straight lines. Now I think that he altered all of this fossil. And this was the first of three different skulls he did. I'm going to do another one for you real quick here.
Sounds good.
This one is called Homo habilis, but the fossil number is STW53. Okay, now he found it, Dr. Tobias found it in these, I think there's like 14 pieces here. And he had these 14 pieces assembled into a skull. And here's the skull he put these 14 pieces into. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. Now this skull from the front view is this skull over here in the bottom view and the side view. These are all the same thing. Dr. Tobias had asked his colleague to assemble it. His name was Dr. Ron Clark, and we interviewed him. Hang on to your seats because I'm going to show you an interview clip here in just a second of Dr. Clark describing what happens. Dr. Clark assembles this, and this is what he ends up with. And he takes it back to Dr. Tobias, and Dr. Tobias says, Ron, I'm not satisfied with that. That skull is too small. And Dr. Clark says, it's too small. What do you mean it's too small? It is what it is. You can't wish what size you want. See, he wanted it to be a bigger skull, but it was the same size as an ape, like a chimp. And Dr. Tobias wanted him to enlarge it. And he said, I'm not going to enlarge it. The pieces fit where the pieces fit. You can't just separate pieces to make it bigger. Well, Dr. Tobias was not satisfied. Now, this is the same one that altered OH7. He was not satisfied, and he said, okay, fine. And then he comes back to his colleague and asks a different colleague by the name of Darren Curnow to take it apart and make it bigger. So this is Dr. Curnow's. He starts with this and he ends with this big skull. I don't know if you can see how he did that. He adds all this plaster here. Can you see that, Ryan?
I can, yeah.
He just basically blew out the skull to make it bigger. And then if you look at the side view, you can see he made it longer by adding more plaster between. And he changed the skull basically from 500 cc's to 700 cc's to make his Ape-Man.
Wow. Wow.
Now, if you want to see something powerful here, I want you to play this clip right now. And it's Dr. Clark talking about being asked to enlarge the skull for Dr. Tobias. This is a stunning, I guess it's a 2-minute video here. If you don't mind, I'm going to play this right now.
Dr. Ron Clark accused Dr. Tobias of committing fraud by enlarging an ordinary Australopithecine skull, STW53, to create a large brain Homo habilis skull. He characterized it as a forgery similar to the Piltdown Man fossil forgery.
The Piltdown forgery actually was very clever. The STW53 forgery by Kernow and Tobias was stupid.
In a recent interview, Dr. Clark described the events that led up to the fraud.
Philip Tobias summoned me to his office and he said, I want you to make a new reconstruction of STW53. And I said, oh, why? And he said, well, I'm not happy with the brain size, it's too small. And I said, but that's the way it is, it can't be made any bigger. The anatomy shows that was the size of the brain case. He wanted it to be a Homo habilis. In fact, he kept publishing this as a Homo habilis. He then asked a research fellow that he just appointed there, Darren Kernow, he asked him to make a new reconstruction. And what Kernow did was he separated out this near contact here. He separated it out by 8 millimeters and made this wider. He flexed the parietal occipital contact here. He flexed it upward to make it bigger. He took apart other pieces as well and expanded it, and he moved this frontal bone forward to make it very elongated. And it's totally false because there was no justification for what they did. It was simply Philip Tobias's ambition to make this into a Homo habilis.
So that was his second fraud, and I'm not calling him a fraudster. His colleague is calling him a fraudster. And the third fraud he did was a third ape-man, a third fossil of Homo habilis, and it was this one. This is what the fossil looks like. And Dr. Tobias enlarged it twice to get it to be bigger. If you'll notice, these bones connect right here on the real fossil, but look how he separates them here. He puts more plaster here. Look at here, how these two bones connect. Look at here, it's plaster filled, spread out. And so he's doing the same thing on Homo habilis, OH16, as he did for STW53, as he did for OH7. And quite frankly, it's stunning. He did one of our fraud, but I'm not going to cover that one. Those are the more visual pleasing. And so we just covered 3 or 4 frauds, and they're stunning frauds. I mean, they're changing the type specimen, knowingly enlarging a fossil when it shouldn't be that way. And that's only 4 of 150. We still have 146 to go.
Wow.
That's why this story is so big, Ryan. And everybody needs to grab it and start talking about this, because this is the moment we've been waiting for. The reason this has never been caught before is because no one's really had access. See, we had access to the scientists and the fossils because we were filming a television series for national and international television. And we're doing a series on evolution. They never thought that maybe we were questioning evolution. That never came up in the conversation. They thought we were on their side. And so they showed us everything. And they told us stories that would just make your toes curl. And that's why the story has never been able to be discovered before. I had access to at least 10% of the fossils, and I uncovered these 150 frauds. There's more out there, I'm sure, but we couldn't get access to everything. But that was the first set of frauds, Homo habilis. I would like to also tell you about Lucy frauds, if that would be okay.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see more.
Okay, now Lucy, if you thought that last one was good, this one is really good. I'm serious. Everybody just listen up here. Dr. Johansen found Lucy. First, he found a knee joint in 1973 in Ethiopia, Afar, Ethiopia. Then the following year, he found the 60% nearly complete skeleton of Lucy, world famous. And he told everyone that Lucy, even though she was only about 3 to 3.5 feet tall, and all of her features were ape-like, he said that Lucy walked upright like a human. And he offered these evidences for them that actually turned out to be fraudulent. And I want to explain that, what I mean by that. Don't jump to conclusions yet. I want to explain why I'm saying that. So his first point was Lucy walked upright because she had a human-like knee joint. He does this in his show when he's describing Lucy, called In Search of Human Origins, on the second episode. He's showing Lucy's knee joint, and he said, this knee joint is a human knee joint, therefore she walked upright. You know, good enough. Who has the capabilities to say he's not right? You know, that's a very specific, hard diagnosis to make, and I'm going to give him the credit that, hey, he's right, you know. Well, Debbie and I interviewed Dr. Johansen, and he repeated that. And then we went over to Paris and interviewed his partner. His partner's name was Dr. Yves Copen. Now, Dr. Copen's we interviewed right at the beginning of COVID, and then he died since. So he passed away, unfortunately. But fortunately, we have this all on tape. So we're just asking him about Lucy. And we said, Dr. Copen's, you were the co-director with Dr. Johansen when the Lucy knee joint and skeleton was found. Yes, I was a co-director. And he wrote up the article about the discovery of Lucy's skeleton. They were the co-authors. And I said, the knee joint of Lucy, is it human or ape-like? Now, I know he's going to say human-like because Dr. Johansen for the last 30 years has been saying Lucy's knee is human-like, therefore she walked upright. She didn't walk like an ape. Dr. Copen, was Lucy's knee joint human or was it ape-like? Oh, it was ape-like. Wait a minute. You're saying Lucy's knee joint was ape-like? Oh, it was ape-like. It wasn't human. No.
Wow.
I was like, I about dropped my jaw on the floor. So the reason that's fraudulent and not just a mistake on Johansen's part, because Johansen wrote this. He said, all analysis of the knee joint of Lucy show that it is human-like. All analysis of the knee joint shows human-like. Well, his partner didn't believe that. And also we interviewed one of his former students who said that Johansen himself in a class at University of California said when he analyzed it, Johansen analyzed the Lucy knee joint, it came out as a ape knee. But he still told the public that it was a human knee. So that was his first of 3 frauds. If that's not, I mean, that should be the whole show, what I just told you, this thing about the knee, but that's just the first of 3 frauds. Okay?
This is absolutely mind-blowing. This is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And, you know, and how did I miss all this? How did I not think this was the most important part of the story, you know? So the second point Johansen made was that Lucy walked upright like a human, even though she's only about 3.5 feet tall. Every little character about her is ape-like, you know, like a chimp. She looks like a chimp, you know. But he said, no, she walked upright because 1,000 miles south of where we found the skeleton, where we found the Lucy skeleton, at a place called Lake Toli, Tanzania, Mary Leakey found human footprints. And these human footprints look like just 2 people just walked across the beach. And he said, the reason that tells us that Lucy walked upright is because where the footprints were found in Lake Toli, Tanzania by Mary Leakey, the only fossils of the primates found there are other Lucy type fossils. Okay, so it's kind of a hollow argument, but he's saying, look, who else could have made the human footprints in Laetoli other than the Lucy type, since only the Lucy type is found in Laetoli. It's a good enough argument. I get it. I'm not very, convinced by it, but good enough. It's negative evidence. So Debbie and I got on a jet, flew to Tanzania, and we asked to photograph all of the fossils found at Laetoli. I think there was 63 or something like that. And so they pulled them out one at a time. The first fossil that was found, I'm just saying the first primate fossil that was found was LH1, Laetoli hominid fossil 1. And it was like a Lucy type jawbone or something. These are all, I don't know which ones were which, but, and then you pull out the second one, Laetoli hominid 2. It was a Lucy dental arcade, something like that. Laetoli fossil hominid 3. It was, another Lucy type, Australopithecus afarensis fossil. Laetoli fossil 4. So this gets kind of boring. This takes hours. We're photographing each one. And so here it comes up to Laetoli fossil hominid 18. And what does he pull out? It's a human skull. Now, he had just wrote in his book that the reason we know Lucy walked upright, because at Laetoli, the only hominids, that's like ape-man or human, that were found there was the Lucy kind. So they had to make them. In other words, there's no human bones there, and yet Laetoli hominid 18 is human, Homo sapiens, and he knew it because he had added to that collection after LH18 came in, and he had opened up the dig and added more bones to the collection. So he knew that skull, which had also been published, was there. And yet in his book, he said Laetoli only had Lucy type fossils. So these are crazy things to uncover. And then his third one, I think you may have heard about, some of the people who follow creation have heard about this, but it is actually a fraud. I want to show you why. This has to do with him altering the pelvis of Lucy. Now, Lucy's bones of her pelvis were incomplete. They look like this, what we see up here. Can you see this up here? This is filmed Chicago Field Museum. These are plaster copies of the Lucy bones, but these are problematic because the bones on the upper blade of the pelvis go out sideways. They don't come forward and turn forward like a human pelvis. See, a human pelvis turns forward, but these go out sideways like a chimp. And see, and here's the same kind of copies, but at a different institution. This was at Berkeley when we filmed them, and the scientists put them together, assembled them together. But the same problem arises. The upper blade goes out sideways like a chimp. See, this is a very big problem because how Lucy's supposed to walk upright because of this knee joint and because of the footprints. And so it couldn't have an ape pelvis. And so he reasoned, and I would say faulty reasoning, stupid reasoning, wow reasoning, I can't believe you just did this. He reasoned that this pelvis really was human shaped and it just got bent into a chimp shape. So he then did the following. Oh, by the way, here's a side view of the Lucy pelvis. And this is from the side. You can see it doesn't turn forward. It goes straight out towards you. And so he publicly acknowledged that he cut up the pelvis bone. So what he did is he took plaster copies of the plaster copies of the Lucy pelvis, and then he ground, cut up, and reshaped the pelvis from a flat pelvis into a round pelvis. He changed it from a chimpanzee pelvis, which would mean that she walked on all fours, into a human-shaped pelvis, which means, according to him, that Lucy walked upright. And that was a proof that, according to him, this is proof that she walked upright. Well, that's crazy. You can't change the evidence to the opposite thing and be justified. You know what? That's not fraud, though, Ryan. That would just be, again, stupid scientists. But fraud is when you hide it. Now, here is the picture from his book on the bottom left. I want to enlarge that just a wee bit. If you look here at the pelvis, this is after he ground it, chopped it up here, and glued it. And now it looks like a human. This looks like natural bone. See, but this wasn't natural bone. This was plaster that had been chopped, filled in, ground with a grinder, filled in, ground. But he makes it look like natural bone, but doesn't tell the audience that this is altered. And he doesn't tell the audience where it was altered, because you should always indicate that with plaster, and to be very frank with your audience if you're going to do that. Now, he did it in the television show, but he didn't do it for the book audience. And the book audience did not understand that this was an altered pelvis. So that also was a fraud, and that is 3 frauds by Dr. Johansson. I don't know, Ryan. I don't want to, because Debbie tells me I'm socially inept, that I don't know when to quit talking, and that that I should judge possibly that I am talking too much. I feel like have a lot of words, but I could go on. I just don't know what your feel is for the audience, if they want to hear more, or should we stop there and move on to wrapping it up?
Listen, Dr. Werner, I could sit here all day, and I'm sure everyone watching too could sit here all day and listen to these. So you know what, as long as you want to keep going, we are listening with bended ear.
Okay, this sounds good. These are people I like to be around, because I can't get people around me to listen to me, because they say you talk too much. No, I'm teasing. No, I'd love to keep sharing, but you'll have to just cut me off when you think that we've had enough fraud. So I think so far we did the Tobias frauds. It was 3 or 4. It was 4, but we only showed you 3. Now we just showed Johansson's 3. So that's up to about 7 frauds. We still have 143 frauds to go. I'm going to show you the next 10. They come as a group of 10. And these are actually the most damning and dangerous frauds for Christianity and God-fearing people. And I'll show you how he pulled this off. This is this chart by Dr. F. Clark Howell that we all grew up on. This came out in 1965. I was 6 years old at the time. And this was such a powerful piece of evidence showing on the bottom left, a small little ape-like creature evolving, standing upright into modern man. And this chart, I don't have the label here, but on the book, it's called On the Road to Homo Sapiens. And it was made by Dr. F. Clark Howell from the Chicago University. And we interviewed him. At that time, he was in University of California. We interviewed him. And we also interviewed his colleagues about this chart. And it turns out that Dr. Clark Howell knew that 10 of these creatures, there's only 14 creatures here, 14 or 15. He knew that 10 of them were not ape-men, but he put them into the chart anyway. The chart is labeled On the Road to Homo Sapiens. So the chart is saying these are on the road to Homo Sapiens, but 10 of these animals, he knew at the time he wrote the book in 1965, Time Life, called Early Man. He knew that these were not ape-men. He, either through his own words, his own writing, or his colleagues' words, he knew that Pliopithecus, which looks like a modern gibbon, was not an ancestor to humans. It looks like a gibbon. It's a small, side ape. He knew that Proconsul, which looked like a chimpanzee, wasn't related to humans and not on the human line, but he put it in the chart anyway. Same with Dryopithecus, same with Oreopithecus. He knew it wasn't an ancestor to humans, and same with Paranthropus. So there's 5 ape-like creatures. One looked like an orangutan, one looked like a gorilla. Paranthropus looks like a gorilla. One looked like a gibbon. One looked like a chimpanzee. He knew these weren't ape-men, but he put them in there anyway. And he also knew that the last 5 animals, these 5 animals right here, were not ape-men, but they were Homo sapiens. You see, you can't put in 6 Homo sapiens in a chart and saying on the road to Homo sapiens. You only get to put in 1 Homo sapiens. Everything else has to be the intermediate animals. But what he did was he put in Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, and he knew they were not ape-men. He knew they were Homo sapiens, and that is fraudulent. So in all, he did 10. And besides those 10 frauds, other scientists carried out frauds that removed others of this chart. So now the whole chart is decimated. And that was not a mistake, but that was 10 more frauds. And the reason I say that was such an important fraud is because everybody grew up on that. We all thought that they had all the evidence for human evolution, that they had the fossils showing a small ape going into a larger ape, and it was all made up. It was all, he knew it was fraudulent. He knew these weren't ancestors of humans. Very poor, very mean to do that to other human beings, tell them a big fib story that actually is going to affect how they look at life and, how they treat whether God is true or not, et cetera, et cetera. So that was 10 more frauds. I would like to do then one last one. And the reason I'm going to choose this one is because it's in the museums today. The whole thing is a sham. And we came upon this in kind of a roundabout way. This next one, most people here in this audience don't even know exists, but among the evolution scientists, it's the big kahuna. It's like Lucy used to be. Scientists don't believe Lucy's the ancestor of humans anymore, most of them. But the evolution scientists believe this next one called Toumai, Toumai, Toumai. This next one is the oldest upright walking ape-man ever known. And it's on display at all the big natural history museums. And the whole thing is a sham. I want to show you how we figured this out. Here is Toumai. It was on the cover in 2002, on the cover of Time magazine and Nature, the 2 biggest, science journal and public, magazine around. It was big news. It was, the following points were made about this. And I want you to listen to these 4 points because they're very important, because I'm just going to tear them down in just a minute here. He said, Toumai walked upright because the hole on the bottom of the skull was in the human position. He said it was 7 million years old because he found it embedded in rock and had to be dug out of the rock. And he dated the rock to be 7 million years old. And he also said that the only part of this animal was found was the skull. There was no other bones found, like the leg bones or arm bones or anything like that. And he went on record on all 4 of those points. And when we filmed the interview with the scientist who promoted this fossil, his name was Dr. Michel Brunet. He's in Paris, College of France in Paris. And he wouldn't let us photograph the fossils, which I thought was very strange. So we had to then try to find someone that was there that may else have taken photographs of the fossils. And we found his partner, Dr. Alain Bouvillain. And this is all shown in episode 8 of our video series. And Dr. Bouvillain said that the 4 points that were made were false. Now, Dr. Bouvillain was there when the fossil was found, and Dr. Brunet, who's promoting it, wasn't even in the country, in Chad, in North Africa. He knew more, Dr. Bouvillain knew more than anybody about the fossil. And Dr. Bouvillain's first point was, this was not found in a rock layer. And Dr. Bouvillain took this picture of Toumai's skull about an hour or two after it was discovered, Dr. Bouvillain said, look, it's found laying on top of sand. You don't have to dig it out of the rock. And there's no rocks to date. It's just laying on top of sand. You can see where it was. It was on this, you can see this imprint here where it was laying on its side. We sat it upright. He said most of the fossils there you just find by just picking them up off the sand, and you would have no way to date them because they're not embedded in a rock layer. These are in the Jurab Desert in Chad. The wind blows, these fossils get moved around. They have periodic flash flooding. The fossils get moved around in the flooding. There's animals walking around, and it was not in rock. So the next point that Brunet made was that there's no other bones other than the skull. But you see this bone I'm pointing out here? Mm-hmm. So this is a ape-like femur. And he specifically said that there were no femurs, there was no leg bones, arm bones of this animal, only the skull. But here's a picture taken 2 hours later, and the skull is laying right next to this femur, maybe 2 feet apart. Why would he keep that a secret? I'll show you why he kept it a secret, is because that femur, and here that femur that I just showed you, here it is in 4 different views: the front view, the back view, the left side view, and the right side view. The reason he didn't want anyone to know about it, I believe, is because it looks like a chimp femur. Yet he's saying it walked upright like a human. Well, chimpanzee leg bones don't go along with an animal that walked upright. Now, what I did is I took a modern chimpanzee femur. This is a copy of a bone clone's chimp femur, shot in the same 4 directions as these. This is front, back, inside view, outside view. Then I laid this bone on top of the chimpanzee, and you'll see why he did not want anyone to know about this femur.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Are you kidding me? I mean, you couldn't have a better match. I mean, you could see it all there. I mean, you see before and after, and this is from an article. The femur was uncovered and exposed like 18 years later, but still the museums don't even acknowledge that a femur was found. And that was fraudulent. That was a third fraud, saying that there was no other bones found. And his 4th fraud was this, that the hole on the bottom of the skull, I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing to on this plaster copy here. This is from the computer reconstruction. The hole on the bottom of the skull is called the foramen magnum. That's where the spinal cord enters. Okay. And here it is here too. These are both tumai. This is a computer reconstruction. And this is the, when they 3D printed it and they printed it out, this is what he's holding in his hand. He said the hole in the bottom is in the human position. It's more forward, which means that Tumai walked upright. But Dr. Brunet, this man here who's promoting this, will not allow scientists to see his CAT scan. He would not allow us to see his CAT scan after we interviewed him. He would not allow us to see his original fossils. He won't allow other scientists to look at his original fossils. And he won't allow people to photograph his copies. And he did not allow us to photograph the copies. Worse yet, he will not provide the museums with this copy or this copy. And so all the museums of the world have a false copy on display because he won't share it. Why won't he share it? It's because I think he did what the scientist that did Neanderthal incorrectly and moved the foramen magnum. I'm trying to think of his name. Excuse me for a second here, but in 1908, the scientists on Neanderthal man moved the foramen magnum into an ape-man position, and I think he did the same here, because if you look at the CAT scan, it doesn't look like there's missing bone here, but his last copy, he has all the bone removed. And what this does is allows him to move the foramen magnum forward. And here's how you can see it best. Here's a gorilla, and here's a human skull. These are all our pictures. You can see the foramen magnum. It's in the back for a gorilla. It's more towards the center for the human. And this is how he found tumai. It was all distorted. The foramen magnum is all distorted. And you can tell the whole skull is distorted because the teeth, the right teeth line up with the foramen magnum. See, that's not natural. The right teeth should go out to the side, you know. But so the whole skull is twisted and distorted. And what he did was he CAT scanned this, and then he moved this piece right here. See, this piece here in red is this piece right here. It's right in front of the foramen magnum, which is this piece right here. And when he saw this distortion here, he had a choice: either pull this down, this side down, and then it would be a gorilla-like skull or ape-like skull, or he could remove bone here and push this up, and then it would be in an ape-man position. And that's what he did. He moved the foramen magnum from where it started, and he moves it here in the final copy. So I don't know. I found it astonishing that the museums are so poorly curated that they have false fossils of tumai there, that they don't bring up the femur, that they also display, the museums today display Lucy's pelvis in the cut and reshaped position, and don't explain that they don't explain that Neanderthal man was altered in 4 different ways, and we cover that in our video series. They don't understand, you know, it just, the museums, I could go into a museum today and just show you, okay, this fossil, 1470, this one's been altered. This fossil, the Trichonoboi, Homo erectus, it's been altered. And this is all in our video series and in the books. You can see it all. I'm not just making this up. You just go through the museums, and the bulk of the fossils there have problems. And now it looks like naturalism has died. To me, this is it. You know, you had 232 mistakes in the ape-man already, and those have been disproved. That's in 9 categories. And all of the fossil record for all the other animals doesn't match evolution. And now to find out that these ape-men are either altered, fraudulent, very partial, or, you know, skimpy fossils that you could make them up as anything, or that they hide the fossils from their colleagues, which there's multiple examples of that. And we did that in our episode 8 too. The theory, it has no meat. It's a false theory. And now everyone needs to understand this, that no, evolution just not only took a hit, but evolution just collapsed.
Wow. Now, you mentioned Neanderthals. Now, Neanderthals are a personal favorite of mine. I've done a lot of research on this. What have you discovered about Neanderthals?
Well, I wasn't going to do this, but you're making me talk for another 5 minutes. So when they found Neanderthal in 1859 in Germany, Mettmann, Germany, we filmed there. It was just a partial skull cap. You really couldn't know what it was. And same way in I think it was 1890s or 1870s in Spee, Belgium, they found a couple more Neanderthals. But the bottom of the Neanderthal skulls were absent. See, they're absent. And so they didn't know really what it was. And did it have a hole in the back for the spinal cord like an ape, or was it more in the center like a human? And this all changed in 1908. Dr. Marcelin Boule, who was the curator at the Natural History Museum in Paris, received a nearly complete full skeleton of Neanderthal. This was unheard of. They had so much. They had so many bones. They had almost a complete skull. And Marcelin Boule had the opportunity to answer the question, was Neanderthal just human, or was it something else? And he blew it by doing 4 frauds. And I want to tell you what those frauds are. I'm just going to do this off the top of my head. First of all, this is a human skull. Dr. Marcellin Boule, just like this guy, who was also in Paris 100 years later, moved the foramen magnum of Neanderthal from the human position and moved it back into the ape position. He hid these changes on the copies of the Neanderthal skull. And it was not appreciated that he had moved the foramen magnum until 1980. And once Marcellin Boule died in 1950, because before that, he wouldn't allow other scientists to see his Neanderthal skeleton. They could look at it, but you can't touch it. You can see it there it is, but you can't pick it up and examine it. And like the scientists from the Smithsonian had gone to Paris 3 different times. The scientist, his name is Aleš Hrdlička. He was a curator of anthropology at the Smithsonian. 3 different times he takes a boat, an ocean liner, to Paris to see this new full skeleton of Neanderthal. And 3 different times Marcellin Boule says, nope, you can't pick it up, you can't touch it. Now that should be a sign that there's something hokey going on. Yeah. So once Marcellin Boule died and scientists started getting in there, they realized he made all this up. He moved the foramen magnum, the femur bone of, not the femur bone, but the tibia bone of Neanderthal was a little bit tilted back at the top. And that is common in humans today. I mean, it's not unheard of. And Marcellin Boule knew this, but he said, no, this knee, because it's bent back, meant that he walked bent over. Then Marcellin Boule altered the diagrams of the neck bones to make it look like an ape-man. And this is all in our book and video series. And I forget what the 4th fraud that he did, but he carried out multiple frauds and then created the imagery that Neanderthal was bent over like a gorilla. But in fact, if you saw the museum recreations of Neanderthal today, you wouldn't even know it's anything other than just a human. And I have on camera, on our video series, scientists after scientists after scientists saying, if you shave Neanderthal man and put him in a suit and put him in a bus, and you sat next to him, you wouldn't even notice there was anything wrong with him.
Wow.
Scientists after scientists after scientists say that, and yet the public still falsely believes that Neanderthal man was some kind of ape-man. And it was this is all folklore based on Marcellin Boule's 1908 fraudulent reconstruction of Neanderthal man. It's very fascinating. Everyone should read that in our book. I think it's book 4, volume 4, you know.
Wow, that's and I know scientists will say, well, we don't believe what we did anymore, but as you were saying, people still believe this. The public still believes, that Neanderthal was something less than human. I mean, there's still kind of a byword, right? You Neanderthal, right?
That's exactly correct. That is the public's perception. And the scientists should have quashed it, in the 1980s when they figured this out about the alterations, but they didn't. They just kind of let it percolate along, and it's a evidence for evolution. That's why they don't want to knock it down and be too difficult, But no, it's false thinking. It's a human being that looks human. I don't know how you could call it anything other than a human. If you see some of these pictures of Neanderthal, like there's one from the University of Zurich online, a Neanderthal girl. I mean, she looks like, your favorite daughter, she looks beautiful. She does not look like an ape-man. So no, it's a false folklore that the evolution scientists don't want to get rid of too quickly, because it'll make them look bad when people find out what really happened, that it was alteration. When he did this skull and he moved this foramen magnum, I forgot to mention this, he used cork to move the pieces, and then cork wax, and I think he used a nail up here that only became apparent after you CAT scanned it. He used cork to hold the pieces together so he could move this thing.
Wow.
It's very bad.
So when scientists and the media, they say that the Bible is a book of fiction, in fact, it's the evolutionary textbooks that are filled with the fiction, right?
That's exactly right. You know, we've been told that the story of creation was baloney, you know, and that they had all this evidence for evolution, and yet the fossil record was baloney. That those were fake fossils of like the walking whales and the flying dinosaurs. Those were all fake. And this idea that there was no modern animals living with the dinosaurs, and yet that whole idea was fake. That the idea that they had all these ape-men, you know, these charts, that was all fake, you know. And yet there's a story that Jesus Christ told. He was saying that, you know, during the time of Noah, that people were eating and drinking and giving in marriage. This is Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is referring to the Noah flood as a real event. And yet the evolutionists say, oh, you can't believe in the Noah's flood, the worldwide flood, even though there's saltwater creatures in all the layers, even though there's modern animals in every layer. It's time to shut the lights off for the theory of evolution, for naturalism. It's over. If you want to hold on to it, I'm sure a lot of evolution scientists will go to their grave believing it, but it just bit the dust. I mean, with all this information that just has come out in the last 20 years, no, it's just you'd be a dang fool to believe in the Big Bang, the origin of life from chemicals, evolution, you know. And I'm just hitting on the top points. I mean, we're not even drilling down on some of these points, you know.
Absolutely, and I want you to tell people in a few minutes when we get to the end here how they can get a hold of your material and all that. But I just have a few follow-up questions, if you don't mind. You know, we heard, you know, years ago that humans and apes were really 98 or 99% similar. You know, what do you say to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, this is false idea that the evolution scientists have the capacity to correct and put it in perspective, but they don't. But I'll just take 2 minutes to do that real quick. Oh, humans and apes are similar in the DNA. That's very interesting, because apes have 48 chromosomes and we have 46. I would not call that very similar. You know, they have a totally different number of chromosomes. Number two, the human Y chromosome, which is the male chromosome, the sex chromosome, looks completely different than the ape chromosome, Y chromosome. And yet we're 99% or 98% similar. I find that very fascinating. And then the third point is that 98% of what? 98% of what number? Because that's kind of important. You know, is it 98% of the whole number of letters of DNA is 100? And so we're only 2 letters difference between an ape and a human. If you have 2 letters difference, then yeah, maybe you could evolve from an ape to a human. But the number of DNA letters in a human and a chimp basically is 3 billion. 3 billion. So you have to do, let's say it's 98.5. You do 1.5% times 3 billion. That's 0.015 times 3 billion. That comes out to be the difference between an ape and a human. The closest animal to humans is 45 million letters of DNA. 45 million letters of DNA. And these letters have to change one at a time by accidental mutations in a 20 trillion cell animal. And it has to be in the right cell, and it has to be at the right location on the DNA. And you're going to say that you could do that correctly 45 million times? Those numbers are astronomical. No. If that's the closest animal to humans, and we're supposed to have evolved from an animal, that number is so astronomical. 45 million letters difference, and you're saying we're close? I don't know what you're smoking, but It ain't Marlboros, I could say that. No, that's an enormous difference. And when you actually look at the mechanisms to change those letters, yeah, it's impossible.
Wow. Yeah, let's think about this from a Christian perspective just for a minute here, because you mentioned that, apes are the closest looking thing to humans, right? So from a Christian perspective, why do you think that God made humans and apes look sort of similar?
Well, he wanted us to do a lot of Zoom calls together, waste a lot of time. No, here's why. And I have in my book one, the Green Book, the Evolution of the Grand Experiment, I think it's chapter 5, called Similarities. You have to look at animals that are similar appearing, that are totally unrelated to each other to get to the answer to this. And for example, if you go down to Florida and somebody yells, shark, shark, and why is someone yelling shark? Because people are out there swimming, they see the dorsal fin. And it turns out it's not a shark, it's a dolphin. See, look at the similarities between a shark and a dolphin. They both have the dorsal fin, they both have the pectoral fins, they're both aquatic, they both have teeth, et cetera, et cetera. But a shark is a fish. A dolphin is a mammal. There's no similarities. In other words, they couldn't have evolved from an animal that had a fin and dorsal fins and pectoral fins. So there's the important point, is that there's animals all over that look similar that couldn't be related, like an insect and a plant, the walking stick. An insect's not a plant, and yet it looks similar. So, I think God had a sense of humor. Maybe he wanted to show that he was the engineer, that he engineered this stuff. And so he put in similar parts because, it'd be good to have a dorsal fin, no matter what kind of animal you are, if you're going through, the water. And I'm not bothered by that anyway. When you see the different animals are totally unrelated, have similar parts. Think of this: a fly, which is an insect, a bat, which is a mammal, a bird, which is a bird, and a flying reptile, the pterosaurs, which is a reptile. Insect, mammal, bird, and reptile, they all have wings and they all fly. They're similar because they have these wings. They're just totally unrelated. So just because you have similar parts, similarities, it doesn't mean you're related to that animal. No, that's a false argument that's put forth by the evolution world, and yet there's exceptions to it all over.
So similarity in living things is you see as a common designer, God.
Common designer, yeah, common designer. Because if it was an evolutionary thing, then every time you see these similarities, you should be able to find the intermediates.
Right.
But even finding intermediates between apes and humans, that's very problematic after I showed you all the information I just presented,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to ask you just two last things here. Now, you went from an atheist, evolutionist, someone who believed in millions and billions of years, to a Christian and a young earth creationist. Now, I just wanted to ask you, what convinced you that the creation is in fact young?
I'll try to make it into a 45-second answer so my wife doesn't bark at me after I get off of this. You talk too long about the age. Okay, here's why. The universe being billions of years old is based on the principle of the Big Bang, that 13 billion years ago, all the matter was compressed, it exploded, and then slowly the stars formed. That's where that 13 billion years comes from. But the Big Bang is a false theory because it doesn't explain where matter came from. That's the big question. Where did the universe come from? It can't explain the origin of matter, and it can't explain the complexity and organization of the universe. We have these spiral galaxies coming from a disorderly explosion because that violates another law of physics. So the Big Bang is false. So you can't date anything from the Big Bang. You just got to take that off the plate if you want to be an honest scientist. So that would be the billions of years. And then the millions of years comes from the geological column. Like if you go to the Grand Canyon, you can see these layers, one layer on top of another layer on top of a layer. They're flattish. They look like pancakes. You've seen that, right, Ryan?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, they're the flat layers. And I used to always believe that they were laid down over millions of years. But the reason you know that those were laid down rapidly is because there are places where those layers occur, and one would be out in Joggins Cliffs in Nova Scotia. We filmed there, where the layers, hope you can see me here, here's a flat layer, flat layer, flat layer, that are going alongside a tree trunk. And there are three different layers. These are called polystrate trees or vertical trees. And what they were is trees that were in Noah's flood that were floating around. They got waterlogged, and some of them went flat, lay down sideways like this, like at petrified forest. But some of them sank this way, and that was Steve Austin documented that at Spirit Lake. When they went down, then the waves and bringing in sediment laid down one layer, a different wave came in, laid down another layer, a different tsunami wave coming from a different direction brought in a different sediment, and third layer. And so we have trees that are vertical going through three layers, and evolution scientists would say 30 million years for those three layers. But a tree doesn't stay standing upright for 30 million years. You know, a tree stands upright for about 100 years, and then it dies, and then it rots and falls over. A tree could not stay vertical for 1 million or 30 million years. So these trees were there, the layers were laid down rapidly. And once you understand that simple fact, then all these layers could be laid down rapidly. You could say a year, whatever you want to say, but it wasn't necessary to be hundreds of millions of years. All these layers could be laid down in a year. And I can go into that in more detail, but I don't think it's appropriate. But no, so the millions of years is those layers. The billions of years is a disproved theory of the Big Bang. And so what are you left with? It sounds like Jesus' words, you know. In the time of Noah, Jesus said, there were people being given in marriage and eating and drinking. So Jesus believed in the flood, which is a recent event, and this is the truth. Everything that the scientists have been telling us for the last 150 years are just made up stories, made up primarily by atheists who went in to their science with an attitude of a dislike and hatred of Christianity. And so they're just writing, come up with theories, you know, not even thinking about the truthfulness of what they're saying. No, it's over.
And does belief in deep time, do you think that's consistent or contradictory with the biblical record?
Well, you'd have to ask a religious expert on that one. But, you know, the story of creation and the story of the flood came out of the Bible. No one had the flood story right except the Bible. The scientists missed all of that. And so the Bible also has this account, you know, Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah. You can add it all up and come to an age of the earth, I'll say less than 7,000 years old, depending which text you believe, Masoretic or the Septuagint. But it's kind of young, according to the Bible. It's like less than 10,000 years old. So you would have to have a very strong reason if you're a Christian and then you want to believe this older thing. You have to have a very solid reason to abandon this genealogy that was laid down by an eyewitness. So yeah, I have converted to, you know, I'm a backdoor Christian. You know, I'm the guy who came into church the back way, the science way. And I wish my parents had gone to a church that believed in the Bible and said the Bible's true, evolution's wrong, there was Noah's flood, and I would have saved myself a lot of grief. I'm saying a lot of blood on the sidewalk for having to figure it out, naturally, just going around and, conferring with the scientists and looking at their fossils. I would have saved a lot of time. It's just the simple answer. It's like, believe,
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned, before we started this interview, you mentioned something about curriculum that you have. I wonder if you could tell them about that. And please tell everybody watching where they can get a hold of your material.
Okay, so for the material, the simplest way to get a hold of all of our materials is our website, because it acts as a clearinghouse of where the best place to buy different items are. For example, the books are from this site. The DVDs, you would go for here. So just go to and then also there's a video on demand where you can watch all of our videos from your home computer or on your phone. So the address for the website is thegrandexperiment.com. Thegrandexperiment.com, no spaces, and that's it. Now, I have a worry, and it's for everybody in this audience, and it's for your children, if you have children. Your children are getting creamed right now, and when they're going off to grade school, high school, and college, they're getting creamed by their professors who are giving these very lofty arguments for evolution that they would not be able to fight on their own. And they're going to get creamed, and you're going to lose them. Then you're going to lose them to atheism. There's so much temptation in that age group, starting around 4th grade, the temptations start creeping up, and all the way through college with all that temptation, and then their professors and their college, high school, grade school teacher to tell them evolution is true, they're just going to cave. It's imperative that every Christian prepare their children for what's about to happen to them. And I think the simplest way is for everybody to get their kids to go through our 4 semesters, a curriculum on creation science. And it's all fossil books, if you go through, this is our Living Fossils book, it's all science-based, it's all pictures of fossils, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have your kids starting maybe 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, go through the 4 semesters. So 4 classes simultaneous, one after another, they will be able to stand up to any professor in grade school, high school, or college and just shoot them down, because the evidence is in that this doesn't work. But you have to prepare them. If you just say, that was a nice lecture by Dr. Werner, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You've missed the point. Your kids are getting creamed. They're getting creamed because of what they're being exposed to on the internet, on their phones. And unless you prepare them, I just fear for the families, because we all know the last 20 years have been disastrous for Christian families. Please, please, please start the 4-semester curriculum. Now, you might say to yourself, if I heard me saying this, I think that guy's just trying to get rich. No, I'm trying to get poor is what I'm trying to get, because we're not making any money on this. Everything we do is a money loser. We'll never get paid back for just the money we put in, much less our time. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme by Carl Werner and his wife, Debbie Werner. If you knew us and you knew what kind of car I drove, you would know this is true. But it's not for money. I have no care for money. I don't need money. I have, because I was a physician, so I don't need money. I want people to grab this, save their children, and we can start turning this around. And by the way, if you're a school administrator, Catholic, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter, Jewish, you can all use the same books, because there's no mention of a sectarian ideas in there. It's just evolution doesn't work. So everybody can take these books, the videos, the teacher's manuals, and please take them into not only your homeschool moms, but the secular and Christian and all these different religions schools, and teach it there. And if you're in charge of a church school, please demand that they start this, and let's get going. We got to get going here and turn this thing around, because right now the world is sliding because the Christian kids are getting creamed and they're all just getting sucked away by the world. And so I just beg from my heart that everybody tonight orders the first semester class. You can get that through our website and start on it this next semester, and then your kids will be amazed. And the kids love this curriculum because I don't know, a lot of kids stay up all night reading the book the first night they get it. I've heard that story so many times because the book is so interesting. And this will be an interesting class. There's no forced ideology here. It's just like, here's the evidence. What do you think? And the kids get it, and they eat it up because the videos are shot on location and they're very good quality. So thank you for letting me make that plug, but I just feel compelled to talk to people and get everybody started on the 4 semesters,
Absolutely. And I want to encourage everybody watching to look into this and to really consider this, because we live in a world that is full of lies, as Dr. Werner has shared with us over this last hour and a half. It's just, we live in this world, and kids are getting decimated with this stuff. And I have Dr. Carl's books and all of this, and I can attest to their beauty. They're excellent. They're well done, well produced. And so, Dr. Werner, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and sitting down with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, we became friends, Ryan, on when we were doing that conference together up in Canada. And
Yes,
and then after that conference, and you had interviewed me at the conference, then I got to see your television show. I had not known about your television show. I don't know if because I'm in the United States or whatever, but I was like, I watched the show that your family produces. It's so amazing. It's so engaging. It's so professional. It's so beautiful. I was like, oh man, I have got a friend for life. So I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate what the Hembrees are doing, all of your sibs and in-laws and all that. All of you guys are doing an amazing job and kind of putting a plug in the dam, And if anybody's looking for some entertainment, that's what they should be tuning into on a daily basis. The Hembree show. I really encourage you to watch it on a daily basis.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And Dr. Werner, I really appreciate your friendship as well. We hit it off right away when we met at that conference, and some friendships just happen that way. And it's just great. We're lifelong friends now. But I just want to thank you again so much for joining me today. But I'll let you go now so you can get back to your lovely wife.
Thank you. We're going to play golf today.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And I hope I can get you back to Canada sometime. We'll get you some Tim Hortons.
So that's what I want their coffee. I want their coffee. They're the best coffee.
They really do. We've got about 5 or 6 of them right here in town. So we love our coffee. And
before you go, I got to say a real quick Tim Hortons story. So St. Louis had 0 Tim Hortons. So the only chance I'd ever do that to go there would be to be in Canada again. And then St. Louis got a Tim Hortons. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble here. Oh. And I had such great anticipation. Debbie, there's a Tim Hortons in St. Louis, And it was so bad. It was like, this is not Tim Hortons food or coffee. It was like so bad. I think it might have even closed. I don't know that for a fact, but it was like the biggest disappointment. So really, the only Tim Hortons I'm going to in the future is Canadian Tim Hortons.
All right, that sounds good. Well, hopefully we'll see you in person very soon.
God bless you. Thank you for the interview.
All right, thank you. God bless.